If you watch a lot of YouTube sports card channels, you may sometimes find yourself getting envious over some of the high-end, super premium cards so many seem to share. But as a sports card collector or investor, it is not necessary to think that the high-end stuff is where you must reside. In this video, I'm going to make a case for why sometimes low and mid-tier stuff not only can be some of the most fun stuff to collect as a collector, but potentially also some of the best cards to actually make some money from as well. Investing in high-end sports cards is high risk, high reward. If you buy a $10,000 gem of a card and the sports card market in general drops a bit, or that particular player's card's value drop a bit, you could be out thousands at the drop of a hat. Or if it goes the other way, you could gain thousands if that player's cards suddenly spike. And that big gain is the hope that draws a lot of people to the high-end market if they're looking to make money from sports cards. If you analyze the sales data over the past some months, you can come to the conclusion that quite a few people are approaching it this way. And it is for this reason that a lot of people's advice to others is to invest in the highest end stuff you can safely afford. But I'm here to offer a different way of looking at this and share my reasoning as to why I personally am much more focused on low and mid-tier end sports cards, both as a collector and as someone trying to make some money with sports cards. Let's start with the collector's standpoint here. From a collector's standpoint, it's pretty easy for me to state my reasoning as to why I prefer collecting lower and mid-tier cards. I like collecting cards that I like, and what I like has nothing to do with the value other people give to them. I like a lot of the lower end 90s basketball card inserts. I like the look of the Panini Studio rookie cards of some of my favorite current players. I like cards with players in University of Oregon jerseys because that's my hometown. None of those cards are expensive cards, but I like collecting them because I like them. They're lower end cards, sure, but I don't treat cards like they're status symbols. That'd just be silly. Owning a super expensive card for myself just feels like an unnecessary luxury. I'm not particularly attracted to that prospect, to be honest. I also don't buy expensive name brand clothing. I don't get any personal excitement over the idea of owning some premium super expensive car. I have no desire or draw to own a McMansion. I don't long for those kinds of high-end luxuries that this world could potentially offer me. They just don't matter. Most of the time, they just kind of seem ridiculous to me, to be honest. I've had the opportunity to have some really amazing beach vacations in Thailand, the Philippines, and Vietnam. They were fun, sure, but I just as much love to go camping in the mountains just outside my hometown if I long for a vacation. Actually, I'd even prefer that, and it's so much cheaper. If I was a multi-billionaire, well, there are certain luxuries I'm certainly bring into my life. I'm sure I'd get a nice hot tub, a good quality heated swimming pool. I'd probably invest in a killer permaculture farm, and a really nice recording studio to make music in. But none of the status symbol types of luxuries mean anything to me, really. And I put a lot of high-end sports cards into that category, to be honest. Now, if a sports card museum existed, I'd be more than happy to go and appreciate that Michael Jordan autograph card numbered out of 23 worth 6 figures, or that T206 Honus Wagner card worth millions. But even if I was a multi-billionaire, I wouldn't find the personal desire or need to own any of those cards for myself. That prospect actually doesn't really do anything for me. So yeah, as a collector, it's straightforward for me. I collect what I collect because I like it, and I don't like unnecessary luxury, so I don't have any desire to keep luxury kinds of cards. But on the investment or money making with sports cards side of things, there's also some things to be said about focusing on a low and mid-tier card strategy. Now, don't think of anything I'm about to tell you as financial advice. This is all just the way I'm looking at things and how I decide to make decisions for myself. Now, let's say you have $5,000 to spend on cards and you're reflecting on whether to invest in one $5,000 card or a bunch of low and mid-tier kinds of cards. If you put that $5,000 into one card, you're putting yourself at the whim of that one card, that one player. All your eggs are in one basket. That's risky, it seems to me. That player could get an injury or just not do as well as you expect him to do, and you're out a bunch of money. On the other hand, if you spread that same $5,000 out to a selection of many cards from many players that you believe in, then your eggs are in many baskets. Maybe with one of those baskets you do lose money, but because your money is spread to a number of places, that one loss is less severe, unless you've really just made all sorts of buying mistakes. But otherwise, you're more likely in a position where your money is safer. In addition, in order to make money from that one $5,000 card investment, most likely your strategy is just kind of going to be to sit on it and wait. In the meantime, you could be missing out on other little possibilities that existed if you were to have had a flow of cards coming and going. If you've spread out your $5,000 chunk of card money to a bunch of cards, and you've got some in there that are shorter term holds, some that are medium term holds, and some that you expect to be longer term holds, then you're set up to be able to meet the demands of the sports card market wherever it may go. Most likely, this means you'll be able to sell cards more often whenever opportunities arise, and then have funds to work with whenever other opportunities suddenly present themselves. Maybe a year or two later, that one $5,000 card could have brought you back a larger percentage return than any of the low and mid-end cards that you've invested in if you were lucky and made a good purchase. But if those low and mid-end cards helped initiate an ongoing flow of buying and selling, then the total amount you made through that ongoing buying and selling process is most likely going to be more than what that $5,000 card would have brought you back, even if it did end up being a good ROI kind of card. A bunch of small, regular, ongoing gains is very often going to be bigger than one large gain. At least as long as you were learning as you went, capturing your learning, and making decisions based on your learning. And since you weren't entirely dependent on any one dude during that whole process, you were also shielded against some of that risk. And since you were learning through that whole process, you've also developed a better understanding of the market itself, which will help you make better and better decisions over time. Without that ongoing interaction, it's hard to really get to know the ins and outs of how the market is functioning. Another thing to consider that I would suggest speaks to the potential benefit of focusing on lower and mid-tier cards if you're looking to make money is the conditions of the world economy at large. Now, this is getting really macro here, but the world is a mess and the global economy is built on a foundation of sand. Currently, I would suggest that a lot of the high-end sports card market is propped up by the super wealthy. Quite a number of people who have the money to do so have approached the high end of the sports card market as part of their alternative investment strategy, in the same way they do with the stock market, with real estate, with NFTs, with Bitcoin, or with other things that they think will turn a high profit. But I would suggest that it wouldn't take a catastrophic situation for quite a number of those higher-end investors to decide their money would be best situated outside of sports cards. And if a number of them did make that decision, I could see an exodus of others following suit, or following the suits. This would be especially true if the global economy took big dips, which is not a tough scenario to imagine by any means. This would be unlikely to have a major effect on low and mid-tier cards, but on the higher end stuff, it could bring the value down a lot, it seems to me. On the other hand, even if an unstable global economy did cause wealthier people to take their money out of sports cards and look for investment opportunities elsewhere, collectors are still going to want to collect. That's a given. Sports cards have been around for more than a century. The hobby has evolved over the decades to practically be a culture all its own. Sports cards are still going to be sought, almost no matter what happens in the world at large. So even if an exodus of the super wealthy did take their money out of sports cards, the industry as a whole would still be there, I would suggest. It would just shift to prioritize cards that aren't so inaccessible to most people. So those low and mid-tier cards are likely to still be sought, even if the economic conditions of the world were to get worse. I've heard it said that if the conditions of the global economy did get worse, then people just wouldn't be into sports cards anymore. They'd be too busy struggling just to get by, but I don't think that'd be the case at all. In fact, in times of difficulty, I think people are even more active in looking for outlets to help them relieve stress and focus some of their mind on things that aren't so heavy. Sports cards are that outlet for many. Even in times of struggle, sports cards can bring joy. Collecting sports cards, if approached in a healthy way, I would suggest, can actually help to bring a balance to a stressful existence. I don't think it's a coincidence that so many people got back into sports cards again when the pandemic struck. I think that yes, part of it was the fact that so many people were stuck at home and looking for something to do and some way to make some extra money in a tough time. But I also think that it was an outlet for people to release some of the stress that was arising at a time of real uncertainty. It was a tool people used to find their inner balance. So I would suggest that even in difficult times, or at times when the economy is really struggling, or people are facing hardships because of the messiness of the disorganized, chaotic global order, sports cards will still be here through everything. But the high-end, luxurious part of sports cards is not the part that would ride any major storms well, I don't think. It's just too reliant on a relatively small number of super wealthy people who could easily turn their attention elsewhere. I lived in Macau for a number of years. I taught at an international school there, and as I'm sure you know, Macau is like the gambling capital of the planet. The casino industry in Macau is double that of even Las Vegas. In fact, more than 3/4 of Macau's revenue comes from gambling taxes. The casinos pay a 40% tax to the city government there. The schools are funded by gambling taxes. The roads are built with it. The libraries, the museums, the parks, everything is funded by gambling taxes. And during the best of times, Macau is just swimming in money. Sometimes so much of it that the government just gives the excess back to the local residents. But when things get tough due to something like, say, a global pandemic or an economic downturn, what are the first industries affected? These things that are so core to Macau's economy don't do so well when people are huddling down to deal with chaos. Luxury tourism, casinos, Rolexes, high-end sports cards. I would suggest these are the kinds of things that don't do so well when hardships strike. But cheaper tourism, or low and mid-tier sports cards, that's a whole different thing. That's accessible even when things are tough. So even in the worst of times, I think low and mid-tier sports cards are potentially liquid, are valuable, and are sought by a lot of people. And then one more angle to look at is just simply the angle of fun. So I think it's better to end on a little bit of a lighter note than this whole chaotic global economy. Sports cards are a hobby. Sports cards are supposed to be fun. Hobbies are supposed to be fun. And if all your money is tied up in one or two big cards, where's the fun? How can you enjoy your time in the hobby if you're just sitting for 3 years for this 1 or 2 cards to grow in value? But if you've got a whole stash of cards to work with, there's all sorts of fun to be had. You can sell some, you can keep some, you can trade some, you can flip some, you can hold some, you can give some away. You can do all sorts of things. You can learn new stuff about the market. You can interact with the sports card community in a variety of ways. All that stuff is fun. And without the fun, why even participate in the hobby anyway? There's easier and quicker ways to make money if that's the only thing you're looking to do. That's all for this video. Peace.